there are enormous amounts of basically 3 things coming from the West in this state. There is enormous amounts of political influence, as you can see from the leaked Victoria Nuland call. The State Department is basically picking Ukraine's new government. I'm sorry, the Kiev regime's new political officers, and certainly picking the leaders of, setting up opposing coalitions, doing stuff that's basically like, if that was being done by a force within the country, that force would clearly be one of the most powerful forces in the country, right? Number 2, you're basically arming the smaller country with weapons that are clearly superior to the weapons of Russia. In fact, the way Putin describes it is you're essentially trying to create an anti-Russia on Russia's doorstep. So imagine basically it's like the Chinese are arming the Canadians, right? And they're putting like hypersonic nuclear weapons, that can like blow up, Biden in like 45 seconds, and they're mounting them in Toronto. Right, and it's the future that China has more people, it has more money, it's like in every way more powerful than us, and they're thought to covet California, right? Because we owe them all this money, right? So it's a charged and dangerous relationship. The U.S. is very much on the back foot, and here is a sense that Canada is kind of being armed as an anti-America. Canada, by the way, is governed in the Chinese fashion. The streets are immaculate. Heroin is published by like burning at the stake, right? So, totally different Canada, and, this Canada is starting to boom. They have, there's a lot of Chinese investment coming in. They have, factories with whatever, right? So as America in this situation, you're very much on the back foot, and you feel that this is very much sort of an attack. And so you develop, because it's hostile to you, you become hostile to it. And then it's like, look, why do we need all these arms? We need all these arms to defend ourselves against the US Army, which is massing provocatively on our borders, right? And so there's the thing that is being done with Ukraine, and this under natural law, basically, if like somebody is like sharpening his like stone axe on this island, he's like sharpening his stone axe every night, and he's like murmuring your name, he's like, get that mouse fucker, and a mouse fucker, and only one of us is gonna live. It's like, yeah, do you have to wait for him to come over to like your fucking straw mat and have him bash your head in with a stone axe, or are you justified in doing that first? You were totally justified in doing that first. And so, once sort of things degenerate to the level of like war, of like combat, like, yeah, you have to act. One of the ridiculous, stupid things about this like 5-year-old 20th century view of law is this concept of like the aggressor. The concept of aggression does not exist in classical international law. It's basically sort of made up to justify this kind of typical Anglo-American, method of smashing weaker powers, which I call, kick the dog until it bites, and then call it a mad dog and shoot it, right? And so basically, Putin, this is what's going on here. Putin is being constantly kicked, and and Russia is being constantly kicked. And there's this great Twitter thread of like, American great international relations gods, from like George Kennan, John Mearsheimer, Henry Kissinger, 3 ambassadors to Russia, 2 secretaries of defense, all quoted as saying it is insane to provoke Putin by expanding NATO in his direction. There's absolutely nothing that you're getting at it, and they regard this as an existential threat. It's like, suddenly Texas, you have this independent Texas, and it joins the Warsaw Pact.
Right, okay.
The fucking Warsaw Pact. And it's like, basically, don't mess with Texas, or like, Russia is gonna nuke you, right? And like, that's a very threatening and unpleasant situation, and there's no cause for them to do that. There's nothing other than sort of some kind of predatory motive it's just bad behavior. You don't set out, you don't set up man traps outside your friend's house, right? That again is a violation of natural law. And so basically Putin is acting on this basis. And, whereas America is acting on the basis of basically mid 20th century international law, which is that basically any dog that bites is a mad dog, and it probably is going to eat not only you, also your family. So it's just bite you, it's going to kill you. It's not just going to kill you, it's going to eat you. and it's probably going to eat all of your family as well. Dogs are carnivores, and possibly the whole community, right? And so I had this conversation with a very, very serious and intelligent person, you know, leader in a scientific field, and he's basically like, look, you know, if you let Putin take the Ukraine, actually, I think this is Ukraine. If you let Putin take Ukraine, and he will, where will he stop? I'm like, well, I don't know. I guess I'd mainly be concerned that he stops at the Channel. I think if he takes England, that's going too far, right? You know, and I think I would make a stand there, and you know, but really it's the other hemisphere which he's going to do, you know, and my friend is actually, well, okay, once he takes England, then maybe he takes the Falkland Islands. Okay, that's our, and then you know, like you're imagining these like T-72s.
The Falkland Islands belong to Britain.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. But if you take Britain, you have the Falklands, then you have this possession in the Western Hemisphere. Right, you know, and then from that point, you know, you take Buenos Aires, you know, long time, you take Argentina, and then, you know, you're basically like, you know, Spetsnaz are like marching through the jungle, they get to Brazil, you know, they have to work with these peoples of the Amazon, you know, find tubas, you know, hunt monkeys, you know, eventually they wind up in one of these caravans at the Rio Grande, right, you know, and except that instead of a caravan, this is an armored Russian spearhead with MLRS vehicles. It's been portaged over the Darien Gap by natives or something. And, you know, suddenly like rockets are raining down on El Paso, right? And you're just like, okay, it's just El Paso. But soon they're fanning out across the Midwest, right? You know, and this was the fear of my friend. And it's like, I mean, I'm amazed, right? You know, and this is an amazing way to think. Moreover, once you realize that Putin is basically simply LARPing as a Russian 18th or 19th or 17th or 16th century statesman, and not in fact like, yeah, I think he's probably never thought at all about the Falkland Islands. I don't, you know, think he has any plan to march through the Brazilian jungle. He could go over the North Pole, and that way you would have to contend with the bears, right?
Yeah.
He's worked with bears. The Russians are very strong with bears.
Yes,
it would be like Hannibal crossing the Alps, but like Putin crossing the North Pole with bears. Yeah. With bears, right? You know, but I mean, the thing is, if you're into these kinds of lurid fantasies, there's a lot of places you can go. But if you're not, this is completely fucking crazy.